Important. Doll customization is not meant for children. Hi everyone, it's me, Diana, TheDollFairy. Welcome back to my channel for part 2 of the Gemini installment of the Pokemon Zodiac series. To represent the star sign Gemini, or the twins, I chose Mew and Mewtwo, the original legendary duo from Generation 1. Because Mewtwo is made from Mew's DNA, but is still very different from Mew in many ways, I knew that I wanted the two dolls to be drastically different from each other and give off contrasting vibes, while still feeling like they're somehow a connected pair. I imagined Mew as happy-go-lucky and sweet, a futuristic, spacey, magical girl with shiny, sleek armor pieces and lots of pink. For Mewtwo, I immediately thought of the armor it wears in Pokemon the first movie, and I knew I wanted to go in that direction. Mewtwo will be a male doll, that's just how I picture him, taller than Mew, so I will be using this Monster High slow-mo doll as a base. His grayish, purplish blue skin tone is great, plus his face sculpt is really unique. I feel like his pronounced features will actually work really well for Mewtwo's face. I cut off his factory hair and removed the head with near boiling water and a twisting motion. Then I used my jewelry pliers to remove the remaining hair and glue from inside the head. I leave the gray flocking on his head though because it's cool and I think a similar style will look good when he's rerooted. I use acetone nail polish remover to remove the face paint, and then the head is ready to be rerooted. I'll be using Leela, this deep maroon purple nylon hair from the Doll Planet. I chose this color because it will help the skin to appear more purple and less blue, and is similar to the tail color I'll be eventually using for Mewtwo. I divide the hank into shorter pieces because I would later have to cut it, which would be wasteful. I use my rerooting tools, which you can make yourself or buy from TheDollPlanet.com, to scoop up the little pinches of hair and plug them into each hole in the doll's head. When I've finished rerooting the head, I'm using some Fabri-Tac fabric fusion glue to secure it. You can also see my Mew here as well because I worked on both dolls at the same time. I must admit, I hate using this glue. I may need to experiment with different types of glues in the future. After a somewhat unsuccessful boil wash, I'm covering up the hair with a cloth to protect it from the Mr. Super Clear spray while I work on the faceup. For the face, I'm starting with the eyebrows because I think that will be the most important feature in the success of the faceup. This is my first time working with this sculpt, and it's quite different, so I have to figure out how to make it work for this character. Slow-mo's expression was originally a little bit sheepish, with a slight smile. I have to transform that into dark and brooding, so establishing some angsty eyebrows will be crucial. My first attempts still look too good-natured and confident, but I adjust as I go along and I kind of get a feel for the face. I'm using a light gray watercolor pencil for this initial sketch, which is a little difficult to see clearly. I wanted it to be easy to erase until I was fully happy with it. For the eye shape, I'm making sure the eyes have sharp corners and are not too large. You may know that I prefer large eyes, but when drawing male features, I really have to hold myself back. I like to make everything kawaii, you know? When I feel mostly satisfied with the initial sketch, I use a darker color, a brown, to go over the lines and make them more defined. For the mouth, it's tough to change a molded-on smirk into a scowl. I'm trying to make it look a little more neutral by turning down the corners a bit. I draw in the irises, again making sure not to make them too large. He has to look at least a little intimidating. I start filling in areas like the whites of the eyes, and then also fill in the thick arched eyebrows with some subtle purple, mixed with more brown. I use an even darker brown to define the lash line and outlines of the eyes. The mouth is starting to look a little less smirky as I add more dark color to that edge of the mouth. I used the same purple I used for the outlines of Mew's features for the base color of Mewtwo's irises. For pastels, I don't want to give Mewtwo too much blush because again, he shouldn't look cute. I'm using a charcoal gray color to create shadows on the face. One place I need to focus on is the point between the eyebrows. This area needs a lot of shadow to create the illusion that the character has deeply knitted brows. I also put a lot of shading underneath the eyebrows to emphasize that effect, and it makes a difference right away. I'm giving his lips some subtle purple color, but not too much, as I don't want him to look like he's wearing makeup. It should look natural. I also add just a bit of purple to his cheeks for a lively looking blush. Then I spray on a new layer of sealant and start layering color, starting with the whites of the eyes as I usually do. I'm going over my lines with more dark brown and eventually black as well to create sharp anime-esque outlines. I also do a bit of color variation in the irises, creating a gradient effect as I always like to do in my face-ups. This time the irises are small, so there isn't as much space, but using a bit of white at the bottom of the iris and black along the top makes the eyes look like they have some depth to them. I add more blushing and shadow, following what I did in the first layer and intensifying it a bit. Then it's time for another spray and another round of building up color. It's important to add shadows to the whites of the eyes as well, since this character has pretty deeply inset eyes underneath those brooding brows. This makes the effect seem more real. After the final spray of MSC, I take some black acrylic paint and I paint in a pupil in each eye. Then with some white paint, I add a single highlight to the corner of each iris. I also use paint to highlight the whites of the eyes as well. And with that, his face up is complete. I'm pretty satisfied and pleasantly surprised that I was able to turn his expression to give off the vibe I wanted. Next, it's time for the closest I've ever come to doing body mods on a doll. I'm not going to be chopping anything up, but I will be adding a pretty serious tail for Mewtwo. I'm starting with a wire armature for the tail, securing the wire around the doll tightly so that the tail will be securely attached. The main tail armature will be made of wires twisted tightly together to add support. Before I start sculpting, I need to determine exactly which of the armor pieces I've designed will be made from craft foam, and which need to be sculpted in 3 dimensions with Apoxie Sculpt. I make patterns for the different pieces before moving on to the next steps. When I've come up with a plan and shaped the wire tail the way I want it, I use aluminum foil to bulk up the shape before I use Apoxie Sculpt to finish it. I flatten out the Apoxie Sculpt and wrap it around the tail before smoothing it together to create a somewhat seamless finish. I find Apoxie Sculpt a little difficult to smooth out since I haven't really worked with it enough yet to get a good feel for it, but using a bit of water does seem to help to smooth it out. Before sculpting the rest, I'm going to work on the foam armor pieces. I think my reasoning here is that I'll be able to judge better how the finished product will look if I can try on the armor pieces while I'm sculpting the feet and other details. Like I did for Mew, I'm tracing my paper patterns onto craft foam, cutting them out using a combination of scissors and an X-Acto knife, and then I shape them with heat. I hold each piece over my little candle flame for a few seconds, and when it starts to get soft, I press it to the doll's body to shape it. When the pieces cool, they hold their shape pretty well. At this point in the project, I've got all my foam armor pieces prepped, but there's still more work to do on Mewtwo's body. It's important to me to have Mewtwo's feet shaped the right way, so I use Apoxie Sculpt to extend the front of the foot and shape it into what's essentially 2 large toes. I also use this opportunity to change the feet from being basically flat to making the front part the part that the doll will stand on, with the heel raised in the back, like Mewtwo's feet are shaped. Next, I'm sculpting Mewtwo's arm apparatus. I don't know what it's supposed to be exactly. I thought it was cannons at first, but they're really just rounded 3D pieces. So I do my best with that. These teardrop shapes are for the ankle armor. Then I also add little circles to the inside of each heel. While all those sculpted pieces dry and harden, let's take a look at the head. I'm removing the hair covering and will have to give a bit of attention to this unruly hair. When he was first rerooted, he looked like this. I then boil washed both heads, but in retrospect, I should have used hotter water. Out of caution, I use water that's almost boiling instead of water that is literally boiling, and I think that was my biggest error here. I tried a bunch of other methods to tame the hair, like combinations of heat and then cold, blow dryer, then the freezer, etc. But I think the temperature just needed to be more extreme, as this hair is made to be stylable with heat and is stronger than other types of doll hair I've worked with. Anyway, I eventually decided I didn't really mind his hair being kind of spiky and crazy. I created a pattern for a helmet piece, which I thought I would make with more Apoxie Sculpt. I was really careful about following my pattern, but this was just not a good plan. I honestly don't know what I expected here, but once I finally peeled the paper off the clay, it was just way too thin and floppy to hold its shape against the doll's head. So after getting a little exasperated, I made that piece out of a few layers of craft foam instead, which actually worked out a lot better in the end, as you'll see later. Next, it's time to paint the armor. I have these really amazing shimmery paints that a friend sent to me, and I'm going to test out how they look on the foam. The bluish one looks like the perfect match to give a metallic shine and a multicolor look to the armor. I'm really excited about that because of the sci-fi, spacey vibe that I'm going for with Mew and Mewtwo. Mew's armor was a shimmery white, and Mewtwo's will be a shimmery blue. I mixed some paints to match the skin color. Then I used that to paint the feet mods to match the body. Then I create a different purple color for the tail. The shimmery glaze looks even cooler when painted on the epoxy than it does on the foam. I actually really like that they look slightly different and give the sense that there's some variety in the materials used in the armor. When I finished painting everything, I used a couple coats of diluted Liquitex matte varnish to seal the paint. Now all of our pieces are ready for assembly. But we're not done just yet. First, I need to reattach the head. Next, I'm creating some cloth pieces that will go around Mewtwo's waist. I don't know what to call these pieces because it's not a skirt exactly, but it's sort of a skirt, or like a kilt, I don't know. And then there's this longer piece hanging in the middle. I'm sewing gathers into this fabric so that it will look like it falls properly. This belt will go over the quote-unquote skirt pieces. The point of them is for decency and to give sort of a medieval knight aesthetic, but like in space. I'm using some hair spiking glue to give some definition to his hair spikes. I'm not 100% pleased with this outcome, but it's good enough. Now we can start assembling all the pieces. I construct the helmet with tacky glue in 3 layers. Once it's dried, I'm attaching this piece to the head with a pin on either side. The cool thing about this is that I will be able to actually slide the helmet up over the head so that you can still see the face unobstructed. For the arm pieces, when I sculpted them, I made indentations where I could later glue in pieces of purple plastic-coated wire. These will serve as the electrical wires that were all hooked up to Mewtwo when the scientists were monitoring him in the movie. Since they're wires, I can position them in a way that looks really cool and have them stay that way. I also insert these wires into the shoulder armor pieces, so that there are 4 wires on each arm altogether. Next, I glue on all of the armor pieces, starting with the back and chest pieces. I attach the skirt, kilt, whatever you want to call it, by threading some embroidery thread through the top of the pieces and tying it closed around his waist. Then that whole area gets covered by the belt. The shoulder pieces are definitely my favorite part of the armor. And now Mewtwo is complete. Are you ready to see some more doll magic? Let's create the second Gemini twin of the Pokemon Zodiac series. I'm very proud of Mewtwo's armor, the wires attached, the face up, and the sculpting I did on this doll. I must admit that I like Mew better because she's just really more my style, but I think that both dolls look pretty awesome together. This double doll project was a tough one for me to get through, and believe me when I tell you that it took me ages to complete all of these steps. So that makes it all the more satisfying to me to see them finally both finished and standing side by side, creating a really cool juxtaposition. Guys, I am so psyched to be this close to finishing the Pokemon Zodiac series. It has taken me a lot longer than I originally intended, but honestly, that makes me even more impressed with myself that I've stuck with the project this long. So, our final zodiac sign is Cancer. What Pokemon would you choose to represent Cancer? I would like to thank all of my wonderful patrons on Patreon for their support, which makes all of this doll magic possible. If you are interested in becoming a supporter and getting access to behind-the-scenes content, exclusive collaborations and contests, early previews and works in progress, and bonus videos like an in-depth look at this doll's face-up, click on the link in the description to check it out. I'd also like to remind you that the TheDollFairy now has an official shop with apparel, accessories, charms, stickers, and lots of cool stuff for sale. I designed all of the merch on TheDollFairy.com, so head over to check it out and sign up for the email list to find out the inside scoop about upcoming sales and events. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please subscribe, like, and share this video with friends, because I would really love to make it to 100,000 subscribers sometime this year. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon for more doll magic. Bye!